Hi guys, I'm Shiardia Garapi, and this is my sewing room. I have been working on King this week, and I really have been enjoying myself, but I ran out of bias tape, so I'm a little short. I have to make some more, and I need to do these narrow ones for the back and then the wider stuff for all of the edges. So as much as I got done this week, I'm going to show you now. So here I am sewing all of the pieces for King. I had to start with the back because I didn't really have it, and then I realized that all my pieces hadn't been ironed. So here I am watching all of the TVs, the YouTubes, as well as some Netflix later on. I had a lot to iron, and then of course I dropped my camera. Here you see me cutting all the mini bias strips that I started with and sadly needed more of. And then I cut all of my edges off at the corners because I was having trouble last time with my bias tape getting them to match up because some of my bias tape strips were like 1 3/4 inches at some edges, and that kind of messed with my sewing. So when I went to sew them all together like I am now, I had a lot of issues because they wouldn't match up properly because I forgot to cut them up. So I spent a little time with my cat, and then she wandered around in the sewing room and enjoyed her time. And I did many ironing moments with bias tape until they were all done and rolled up onto that little toilet paper tube that you can see. Yes, I use toilet paper tubes instead of any other Notions pieces simply because this is what I have a lot of on hand. I save my toilet paper tubes and then I use them usually in the garden. Here I cut out all the wings and the back of the wings because they're going to be the exact same and they're going to be sandwiched. So I've decided instead of cutting them out independently and sewing them together, I was just going to sew all three together at once. And that's what I proceeded to do for the masks and for the heads. And then I made sure to trace out all of my pattern pieces as I pulled them off of my fabric, since I did want to make sure to be able to do this again, since I know that my nieces and nephews probably are going to want some of their own. And since I made them their cake and ice cream vests, I figured I should probably remake that pattern for my son too. So, lots of kids clothing in the future. Ooh, kids play clothes. Super important. And the reason I'm being so very careful to make sure that all of this is super sewn down and super sewn together is because I want them to be basically indestructible. Trust me, when you're working for kids, they are much more dangerous than adults because adults will carefully watch their seams and children won't. And here I'm working on the mask, and a lot of this had a lot of trouble because I couldn't figure out how to make those eyes be hollow in both layers. And trust me, I had a lot of trial and tribulations and recutting in order to figure it out. And finally I decided just to cut it out with holes, face the eyes, and then I would just hand stitch the facing on the back. Of course, then I forgot that I needed to do the mask through both pieces, so I ended up having to cut a big square hole in the back of the mask and make it, well, work with the eye holes that I had already faced. Oops. Here I am trying to use the bias binding foot, which works perfectly on straight lines, but is not very good for curves. And since almost all of this particular costume is curves, it didn't really work. I did spend a lot of time unpicking a stitch and trying to redo it this way and redo it that way and rethread it, and I just had a lot of trouble. I mean, that's what happens when you're using a new foot that you've never used for the first time. Things happen and you don't really know what's going to happen, and instead of using it on a scrap piece and testing it, I just, winged it and went with it on my project, and then, well, I tried to feedback so that I could actually get to work. Most of this is just me sewing everything together in a multitude of pieces. So I'm going to leave you with some music, and I'll see you at the end. So I am working on King G, and I have finally gotten the wings done. And if you look really carefully, I even have little wing veins. And I mean, our kids may not notice the tiny little details that we put into their costumes, but we do, and that's what makes us proud, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to make the back and the tails and the head, and I'll get back to you. Hi guys, so today is Saturday and I have been working away this week on King Ghidora, and I have a few finished pieces and several pieces that are kind of in the middle of being worked on. So I've discovered that I probably am going to need more bias tape, as going around each of these pieces takes a lot of bias tape, and the added little design features that I want to add at the end are going to end up taking more bias tape, and this is all I have left. So I'm going to have to cut some more, and I know I have some more fabric, so it's not a big deal. But I would say that if you're going to make a costume like this, I would either double check and actually measure all your pieces to see if maybe you're going to get enough bias tape or if you're going to have to switch ideas halfway through. Because unlike me, you may not have all of the fabric that you need. But I mean, it's a live and a learn experience. This is completely made up. I made this pattern up right from the beginning. I started with a mask that I had found on Pinterest and tried to make it so that I could have 3 heads, and then I added on wings that are just going to go with some elastics around the wrist and shoulder. And it's got a back that's going to have some dangling tails. Not very long, because my son is short and has a tendency to like run at full speed. So if your kids are active, don't make your tails like touch the floor or anything. So I know costumes can get a little out of hand, and one of my favorite things is making kids costumes because they love them. The one stipulation that I make for kids costumes is I want them to last. Children are not careful with their stuff. Children are not aware of their surroundings, so they don't know when they catch their arms on stuff. And I want to make sure that these, well, toys basically, are durable enough to last through at least 3 kids. I want to be able to see these clothing go through your children and your children's siblings, and then like give it away to another person before it really breaks down. So that's my thought on it. I mean, you can save it and you can have it for your grandkids, which we've probably are going to do, because some of these costumes are just going to stick around in the family for a long time. But I want to make them so that they're not breakable, so that they can run, they can play, they can roll in the dirt, and you can throw them in the washing machine and you know they're not going to come out all broken. I know lots of people are all like, but they're kids, they're just temporary costumes and they're going to phase out in 3 weeks. Well, yeah, they do, because they break or they can't be washed, or your kids lose their interest and stuff like that. And then it's just more junk in the garbage. And I don't want this to be junk in the garbage. I want this to last a while so that it starts to naturally break down before it's useless. So I'm using cotton and then a poly kind of craft filter stuff. It's a lot of the craft solids that people use for the inside of homemade masks in order to give it a filtration. I'm using it because it's one of the most stable things I have ever seen. It works a lot better than most stabilizers and interfacings, and it's cheaper. It is about $4 a meter, and that's way cheaper than a meter of interfacing, because meter of interfacing is like $15, and even if you get the cheap stuff, it's only $6, and it's only like this wide. This stuff is 150 centimeters wide. So I kind of went with the cheaper stuff. I got a whole bunch of it. I think I only paid $2 for each of it because it was on sale at the time, and I bought 6 or 7 meters of each color, just so that I had lots of mock-up material that I know I could put into the fabric that I'm trying to make. So if it's a coat, this could be an interfacing lining. If it's a costume, it's an interfacing lining. Sometimes, like on a dress, it probably won't be the interfacing lining, but then it can be reused tons and tons and tons and tons of times. So I like the scraps. I like all of it. It's wonderful stuff. I have to admit, I use the scraps for masks. I use the scraps for temporary envelopes. Right now, there is some of this scrap in some tape holding up my bulletin board. It is holding up one of my curtain rods in order to keep all of my stuff organized. So it's handy stuff. So that's what I've been using inside the costume, and it's a layer in between these, and you can't even see it. I think because I made it with yellow, so it's super handy. Because then there's the more yellow color, and even once this washes a lot, it'll still be really yellow because that dye won't come out of the polystyrene stuff. I don't even know what it's called. I know it's called Craft Fun Solids at Fabricland. I'm not entirely certain what the fabric itself is called, but I've got a little scrap of it right here. So this is my cotton. This is the poly stuff that I'm using right now, and it comes in a whole bunch of colors, and I like it. So if you're looking for an interfacing option that isn't iron-on, there you go. I use sewn because irons, as I have tried and tried, as I have done for this witchy hat that I will be coming out sometime in the next month or so. I tried to use iron-on, doesn't like me, so sewn it is. So King Ghidora has wings. He has a mask, which is currently in 2 parts because I need to do some hand sewing finishing on the facings, but he's super cute. It's a little small for my face, remember, because this is just for a 5-year-old, so his mask doesn't need to be as big. And I'm going to attach this to a hood so that he can pull it over his face. And then I'm going to attach the 2 other heads to his shoulders. So he has, dragon shoulders, or the 3 heads all together, and then his wings will be right next to him. And that's hopefully how it turns out. It shouldn't be too hard. I'm still kind of debating whether or not I need to make a piece for the front so that he can keep the weight where it's supposed to be. I'll figure that out once I start putting all of this together. Right now, I still have all of the heads to finish with bias binding. I have all of the head fins to finish with bias binding. The back still needs bias binding additions before I put the trim around the edge. So that's going to be a little bit, and I think I do have to make more bias tape before I even get there. So that's probably going to be today's project. I'm probably going to end up making some bias tape, and that is always fun. And it means I need to enjoy the day. I will probably listen to my YouTubes and my Netflix and maybe even Disney, because Disney came out with a bunch of stuff and it's going to come out with some more stuff this month. So I want to get caught up before the new stuff comes out so that I can watch all of it. I am a super Aliens fan, and I have all of the Aliens movies, all of the Predators movies, all the AVP. I have crocheted myself a alien xenomorph. I have crocheted the Queen xenomorph. I love Aliens, and it's coming to Disney Plus. Not a sponsor, I just really love Disney. So King Ghidorah is today's mission, has been yesterday's mission, and will continue to be the mission this week. I hope to finish it by Monday, but That kind of depends on how many more roadblocks I stumble across, because even with the wings, I stumbled across a whole bunch of stuff, which is why they have these weird little points. So I tried the bias foot, or the bias binding machine foot, my sewing machine foot, which kind of looks like this. So that's my bias binding foot, and I tried it and I found two things. One, it does not work on curves at all. So all these little pieces that I'm doing that are super curvy, it doesn't work on. And it has to have a certain amount fed past it in order to go, as well as it can't stop anywhere in the middle. So it's just for straight edges. So I'd say if you're bias binding around blankets, or if you're bias binding around like coat edges, long, straight stitches or something, go for it. And if you're doing it all in one go, yeah. Stopping in the middle is very difficult. And if your thread breaks, it's also really difficult. It is super, super pain in the butt kind of thing to rethread that way. Yeah, I had some trouble. So since I have a lot of curves, I kind of did this. So what I did was, instead of trying to perfectly bind all of these corners and have them, well, take up a lot of time really, I folded in these corners and then stitched a couple of stitches and then just slipped it over the top of these to guide it up and to guide it to the end. And then I just made a straight one all the way to the end, cut off a little extra, and did the same thing on the end. I just gave it little points. And since what I'm looking at for King Ghidora is, he's a lot of spikes. He's got spikes up from his forehead. He's got spikes up from the back of his head. He's got spikes all over his body. So I figured probably fairly in character, and my 5-year-old won't notice that I just didn't want to do perfect corners. It just takes forever. I can do them, and I did do them for my goose apron, but it took like 15 tries before I figured out how to do the perfect corner again. So that's where we are on King Ghidora. Currently, my coat is sitting right here. I haven't been in the living room hand sewing because I've been babysitting my nieces and nephews this week. And I haven't worked on the D20 for the same reason. So hopefully this weekend will be a little easier. We're a lot more chill over the weekends here. So I definitely will get a lot more done. Yeah. So I will see you guys on Monday. Bye. Well, that's it, guys. So if you like this video, please hit the like button. If you want to continue with our sewing journey and you want to see the videos that are coming up next, please hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to start the sewing journey all over from the beginning, I have the first video linked down in the description box below. So I'll see you guys next week. Have fun. So in that cute little corner back there is my kettle. Nova. There you are. Yeah, there's my Nova. There's my Nova. Yeah, hi. What are you doing back there? Yeah, enjoying some time in the room because you never get to be in this room? Yeah, probably. And now she's going to attempt to crawl into the heater vent. I love her.